Hey guys, let's pick up back with the Wild Robot, chapter 55, The Lodgers. Firelight spilled in from the nest and into the cold, blustering night. Roz sat inside and listened to the wind and the soft crackles of burning wood. And then the robot stopped hearing picked up another sound, tiny footsteps crunching through the snow. "Roz, I'm freezing. Can I join you in the fire, please?" said a weak voice. Into the light crawled Chit-Chat. The squirrel was shivering with clumps of ice stuck to her fur. When she was finally felt the heat of the fire, she collapsed. Roz picked her up off the floor and gently placed her on the warm stone and let her sleep. An hour later, there were more footsteps, and a family of hares shuffled into the nest. They huddled together in the corner without saying a word. Pinktail, the possum, was the next to arrive. "Good evening," she mumbled. "It's certainly been chilly." Swooper the owl hobbled in, followed by some chickadees and a magpie. Fink knew a good thing when he saw it, and the fox lay right next to the fire. And then came Digdown the groundhog. The fuzzy bandits carried the old turtle named Craig, who was in the worst shape of all. Creatures who had been hibernating through the underground had been roused by the vicious weather. Only the healthiest animals with the warmest homes were safe. More and more very weary animals appeared, and slowly the lodge filled up. This was the first time that many of the lodgers had even seen the fire. They gazed at it with a mixture of fear and hope. They could feel the fire's destructive power, and they could also feel the healing power, and it warmed their bones. The lodgers seemed to push forward, eager to feel more warmth, and then pull back, afraid of feeling too much. It was important for the lodgers to understand fire. So Roz showed them how to build one. She showed them how to arrange the kindling. She showed them the bigger animals how to layer the logs. Bumpkin, Lumpkin, and Rumpkin struck the firestones together, and everyone cheered when they finally managed a spark. As Roz looked around, she saw the moles curling up beside the owl, the mouse snuggling with the two weasels, and the hares nestling against the badger. Never before had the robot seen prey and predators so close and so peaceful. But how could the peace possibly last? "I propose a truce," Roz said. "Like the dawn truce, everyone will agree not to harm one another while in my lodge." "Very well," said Swooper. "We're hunters. We can control ourselves." "Then it is settled," Roz said. "My home is a safe place for all." One by one, the lodgers each fell into deep sleep. Even their nocturnal creatures, usually wide awake at that hour, gave in to the coziness of the nest. The robot stood out of the way and quietly tended the fire as her guests slept through the night. Only when the daylight was streaming through the window did the lodgers finally begin to stir. "You are all welcome to stay here as long as you like," said the robot, as the animals rubbed sleep out of their eyes. "My home is your home." "Thanks a lot, Roz." Fink carefully stepped over the hare and the woodpecker on his way to the door. "I don't think I would have survived last night on my own. It's just too bad we can't cram a few more creatures in here." And the fox slipped outside. The robot looked down at the fur and nests that now carpeted the floor. The nest had been completely full last night. If any more animals showed up, they'd be left out in the cold. But Roz was not about to let that happen. Chapter 16, The New Lodges. The second lodge would have to be bigger than the first if it was going to fit Barefoot the bull moose. He was a towering hulk of animal. He was a thick coat of fur. Even he was struggling with the frigid temperatures. Broadfoot lived in the other side of the pond, in the dense section of the forest. It was home to many animals, most of whom were desperate in need of a good thaw. The winter days were short, so there was no time to waste. Rather than walk all the way around the pond, Roz tested the frozen ice to see if it was safe to cross. She threw a heavy rock high into the air and watched it bounce off the hard ice, and then she carefully walked over the ice into the frozen on the other side, and she found Broadfoot waiting for her. The moose quietly led the robot into the clearing in the trees where the new lodge would go. And when Roz made the fire and watched the cold creature begin crawling out of the shadows, "Do not worry," said the robot to the growing crowd. You will all be warm soon, but I need your help." Roz asked the other animals to collect useful things they could find: large stones, strong branches, chunks of frozen mud, and with the robot's building expertise and the tiny animals of army of helpers, construction of the second lodge didn't take long. The animals happily agreed to the robot's truce, and they shuffled into their warm wooden dome. "If you keep the fire alive, it will keep you alive," explained Roz as she dropped another log on the fire. "But be careful, fire can turn deadly in an instant." At dawn, a heavy snow was falling again, and there was Roz setting out from the nest to build a third lodge. She trudged across the great meadow where the fierce winds created enormous sweeping snowdrifts, and she powered through and finished the job, and soon beginning to work on her fourth lodge, and then her fifth. The island became dotted with lodges that all glowed warmly all through the long winter nights, and inside each of those, animals laughed and shared stories and cheered on their good friend Roz. Chapter 17. Strange sounds were echoing on the far side of the pond. What started as a low murmur gradually swelled into some kind of terrified voices. There was an eerie glow in that part of the forest, and the thick plume of smoke began rising above the snowy treetops. Roz charged across the ice and found the second lodge completely engulfed in a raging fire. Frightened animals were running in every direction, fleeing for their lives through the deep snow. "What happened?" Roz shouted to Broadfoot as she galloping wildly past. "We put too many logs in the fire pit," he said without stopping. "The flames climbed up to the ceiling." "My baby is still in there," cried a mother hare, pointing at the lodge. "Somebody help, please!" Roz didn't hesitate. She plowed through the snow and ducked into the lodge. Flames and smoke were everywhere. A tall stack of logs blazing in the fire pit, and in the far corner, a tiny ball of fur was shaking with fear. Crouching low, the robot wound her way beneath the smoke and around the flames and gently scooped up the young hare. "Do not worry," Roz yelled over the roar of the fire. "You are going to be okay." She turned to leave, but the doorway had started to crumble. So she shielded the hare with her body and smashed right through the wall of the lodge. Sizzling pieces of wood went flying as the robot and the hare burst outside into the soft snow. "Oh, darling, are you all right?" cried the mother hare. "Thank you for saving my baby, Roz." Now everything was safely away, and the robot turned her attention in putting out the fire. Her glowing eyes darted around as she computed a plan. And then, with all the strength in her legs, Roz launched herself high into the snowy branches in the nearest pine tree. Moments later, the tree was shaken violently with heaps of snow were sliding down its branches and pouring onto the flames like an avalanche. Steam hissed up from the smothering of the mound of snow. The flames quickly died, the snow quickly melted, and within minutes, all that remained was the charred foundation of the lodge. Roz dropped down from the tree and waited for the frightened animals to return. And when she said to them, "Would you like another lodge?" the animals looked at one another, unsure of what to do. Understandably, they were afraid of another fire would break out, but they were far more afraid of the deadly cold. So they pulled together and they worked with Roz to build a bigger, better lodge on top of the old one. The taller ceiling, a deeper fire pit, and they made it more rock and less wood. And it had a supply of water for emergencies. But the most important safety feature this rebuilt lodge had were the lodgers themselves, who now had a whole new respect for fire. Chapter 18, Conversations. Thanks to Roz's truth, the animals in the nest were mostly harmonious. But the animals, when outside, it was business as usual. Sometimes the lodger wouldn't return. Sometimes the lodger would return with the belly under of another lodger. As you can imagine, that made for some awkward moments. So when anyone was gathered around the fire, they tried to keep things pleasant by having conversations like these. I wonder what Brightbill is doing right now, Chit-Chat said on her back, looking at the ceiling as she spoke, and where he is, and who he's with, and if he's ever going to come back to the island. I'm sure he thinks about us, said Roz. I think about him all the time. I like to imagine that the geese had a big flight in the winter's grounds, and now Brightbill is floating over a lovely lake and eating yummy food and making wonderful friends, but hopefully they're not too wonderful, because I'd like to stay his best friend if possible. That is a nice thought, said Roz, but I worry that the flock might have gotten caught in the icy weather, and I don't think they would handle it too well. Don't worry, I'm sure they're fine, said Chit-Chat. Brightbill is a great flyer, and I know they'll keep the flock out of trouble. He is a great flyer, said Roz, but I still worry. Life is short. Dig down. The old groundhog was giving another fireside speech. I'll be lucky if I see spring. I don't want your pity, and it's had a good run, but I wanted to tell you that if I could do it all over again, I'd spend more time helping others. All I've ever done is dig tunnels, and some of them are real beauties, and some of them are hidden underground, and they're no good to anyone but me. But they're good to me in the winter. Now, you beavers, they have to all figured out. They build the beautiful dam, which created a lovely pond, which made all our lives better. They must feel really good. The beavers made our lives better in another way, said Fink. They taught Roz how to build. Ah, that's the truth, said Digdown. Roz, you might have saved half the island with your lodges, and we'd like to, and to think we used to call you a monster. I will repay you, if it's the last thing I do. Our friendship is payment enough, said Roz. Oh, please, your sweetness is going to make me sick. There's something we got to do, we can do. Your friendship is really enough. Friends help each other, and I will need all the help I can get. My mind is strong, but my body will not last forever. I want to survive as long as possible, and to do that, I will need all of my friends. The animals listened quietly as Roz thought of how told her struggles to survive. Life in the wilderness was hard for everyone. There was no escaping that fact. But the robot had made their lives easier, and if they ever could, the animals would return the favor. I have seen 93 winters, far more than you. Craig the turtle spoke slowly, and I have to tell you, the winters have gotten colder, and the summers have gotten hotter, and the storms have gotten fiercer. I heard that the ocean has gotten higher, said Chit-Chat, but I don't see how that could be true. I mean, where would the extra water come from? You are right. The ocean is higher, said Craig. My grandfather said that long ago, and the island was not an island at all. It was the mountains surrounded by flatlands, and then the ground shook, and the oceans grew, and then the land flooded, and the mountain became the island. Animals from far and wide forced to come here to the flood waters in those early days, and now the animals are living in too small of a place. The island did not have enough food to feed them all, but there was fighting and disease and famine, and balance was finally reached, and we have kept the balance ever since. Chit-Chat's eyes grew wide with concerns. If the ocean keeps rising and the island becomes swallowed up by the waters, I don't know how to swim. And if the waves swallow up the island, we will not have very long time, said Craig. But then we will be long dead, even me. Everything has a purpose. It is Swooper's turn to lecture the lodgers. The sun is meant to give you light. The plants are meant to grow. The owls are meant to hunt. The mice are meant to hide. The raccoons are meant to savage. Roz, what were you meant to do? I do not believe I have a purpose. Ha! I respectfully disagree, said Swooper. Clearly, you're meant to build. I think Roz is meant to garden. Roz is definitely meant to care for Brightbill. Perhaps I am simply meant to help others.